Hi, today we're going to be talking about the information that we need to gather about what's going on around the marketing function to make better decisions. And we're going to call that environmental scanning. So first let's start defining what the environment is. The marketing environment really is everything else that is outside of the marketing department itself that is going to have an impact in the way you're going to be making decisions so that you can create that value that we were talking about and create those relationships with customers. So that is going to involve other aspects of the company, right? You need to understand what other capabilities you have, etc., etc. And also some other actors. First is the consumer. You're going to have to understand the consumer better, right? And you're also going to have to understand your competition and anything else that matters, like the economy, etc. We're going to describe those in detail. Now we're going to make a distinction between the microenvironment and the macroenvironment. So the microenvironment is basically all the forces that affect your marketing decisions that are close to the company. So that's going to be the company itself. It's going to be any suppliers and other collaborators that you team up with, so like your marketing channel partners, that's going to be intermediaries, right? And your competitors, etc. And then you're going to have the macro environment. These are all the really big factors that also influence your marketing decisions, but that are farther removed from the marketing aspect itself. These are going to be things like demographic shifts, changes, and that are happening in health aspects, like we have, for example, right now with the COVID-19, right? The economy, right? The economy tanks. What do we do? The economy is doing great. How does that impact our pricing, for example, right? And technology, right? Something else that could change, that could have a very positive or very devastating impact into the marketplace, and political issues, culture, etc. Now, to try to capture all these forces that are having an impact in how we make decisions, we're going to use a tool that hopefully help us uh, making sure that we are systematic in the way that we gather information so that we actually make better decisions when it comes down to marketing in our case, right? And for that, we're going to use a framework that we're going to call the 5Cs framework. Now, this is not in the book per se, and this is essentially some way of uh, categorizing all the information that is already in the book. So if you actually read through chapter 3 in the book carefully, you will see that a lot of the elements that we have here within the 5Cs are in the book as well. Okay, but this is a slightly different way of organizing the information. I think it's actually more useful. Okay, that's where we're going to use it. And some of the aspects also that we're going to discuss today are going to show up in more detail later on. Okay, so for example, when we talk about buyer behavior, we're going to go more in detail about customer aspects like information search, etc. So some of the things we're going to talk about today, they're going to be new, and we're not going to go into a lot of detail. So you just kind of have to make a placeholder saying, hey, I'm going to have to consider this issue, and later on in the class, we'll discuss more in detail what that issue actually looks like. Okay? So this is mostly the things that you need to watch out for to make sure that you don't get surprised by things that are changing around you that are going to have an impact in the way you make decisions about and creating value for your customer. Now, before we start talking about the framework, the 5Cs itself, let me just try to explain to you why we are trying to gather information about our context and our competitors, etc. And this slide that you have here summarizes the entire class, and all the topics that we're going to discuss fall into this broad schematic about how marketing actually functions. And what marketing is going to try to do, like we have already discussed, is we're trying to create value for the customer, and through that value, establish a relationship with customers long term. Right? That's our goal. That's what we're trying to do. Now, how are we going to do that? Well, the way we're going to do that is first we're going to gather information about what's going on around us to make sure that we can actually create that value. And one of the absolutely principal or most important aspects of this is going to be our customer, right? We need to really understand those needs and wants that we were discussing in chapter one. Okay? And the only way to understand that is actually asking, observing, gathering information about your customers. You also need to take into consideration your company and what kind of capabilities you have and what can you do and what can you not do, right? For example, maybe you're good at R&D, so you can come up with new products fast and in a way that makes them successful, right? Or maybe you have a very strong brand that gives customers confidence, and because of that, you can expand into new markets, right? Those are capabilities within the company that is gonna enhance the way you're gonna actually go about making decisions, right? You're also gonna look at your competitors. What are they up to? What are they not doing? Right? What are things that we could consider doing as a response to what they're doing right now? Right? And then in context, you have all these broad macro variables that I was talking about before, right? Like the economy, right? What's going on and what impact it's going to have and what I do into these conditions, right? So what you're gathering here is information, right? This is information gathering. Why are you doing this? Because you don't know what the best course of action is if you don't know what's going on around you. So you need to start by scanning the environment, trying to understand what's going on, and this is what we're going to learn a little bit about today. Okay? Why do you scan the environment? Because you want to come up with a good strategy, right? And the strategy is going to be outlined here from a marketing perspective. This is your strategy, big picture. Okay, so this is strategy. Strategy to do what? To create value and to earn consumer trust so that you can establish a relationship. How do we do that? Well, once that you understand what the needs and wants are from the customer, now you can start grouping them into segments. Segments are basically group of homogeneous customers. Homogeneous from what perspective? Similar. That's what homogeneous means, that they are the same or similar. Similar from the perspective of their needs and their wants, right? What it is that they are interested in. What are their preferences? What do they care about? And after we know who they are and we put them into groups because it's easier for us to do that from a strategy perspective as opposed to treat everybody individually, which would be ideal, but maybe economically not feasible because it's too expensive. Then what you do is you select a target out of those groups that you have identified in the marketplace of customers that we call segments. You're going to pick a few that you think are the ones that are most attractive for us, given our situation. And then you're going to try to define a positioning. What is that positioning? This is how you want your brands and products to be perceived by the customer. This is going to be based on both objective reality and your messaging within marketing, right? And that's going to influence how people see your brand, right? And after you have your strategy, which is this outline, you have a clear position you're trying to achieve in the minds of your customers. These are your tactics. This is how you make your strategy a reality. These are tactics here. And that's going to be your marketing mix that we were talking about in chapter one. Right? These are the marketing variables that we can push or change or move to make this positioning that we are trying to achieve right here a reality. So positioning is going to dictate what your pricing is going to be, what your promotion is going to be, what your place. So if your positioning is going to be a luxurious and upscale positioning, then your price should reflect that. You should have a high price, right? To be internally consistent. Otherwise, people don't know that what you're saying makes actually sense, right? And also, your product needs to be designed in a way that is luxurious, right? Everything needs to work in conjunction, right? So your 4Ps, product, place, promotion, price, are going to reflect the strategic variables that you have decided. And based on this, the customer are going to see you as a valuable addition to their repertoire or not, right? If they really like your product, what it is that they can get that product, how you're doing any promotional aspects, whether it's advertising or coupons, anything they use from a promotion perspective and your price. They put it all together, they check the benefits they get versus the cost that is associated with it, and then they're going to make a decision to either buy the product And then if it's the first time they buy it, we're going to say that this is an acquisition. Like it's the first time they bought from us. Or if they bought a product from us or services from us in the past, then we're going to say that this is a retention. We are retaining a customer that was already a customer and they keep buying, right? Which is actually a nice thing, right? And this is our sales. This is our outcomes, right? Right here. And that's going to translate to profits. Profits is going to be the difference between this revenue that we are making right here. This is revenue, right? Money coming in, revenue. And the profits is going to be the difference between how much it costs to do all these things that we have here and anything else in the firm and the revenue that showed up. No other function in the firm creates revenue. We do, right? So this is our responsibility in the firm, creating revenue and hence profit. So this is why it's absolutely essential to start with good information at the beginning of this pyramid that I've created here, inverted pyramid. Okay, so that's what we're going to talk about today. How do we gather information? Maybe more than how, what topics do we need to gather information about? That's what we're going to discuss today. In the next chapter, we talk a little bit about how to gather that information. Okay. So what aspects are we going to be looking at? We're going to look at the 5 C's. This is just a way of organizing the information that is in the book. It's a little bit different. Okay. We're going to look at our customers, right? We really should start here. I would say this is the most important of all the buckets. If you have to pick one, they are all important, right? Don't get me wrong. But if you need to pick only one, I would pick this. Number 2, the company. You know, what kind of capabilities do we bring to the table? Number 3, our competitors, right? What are we going to be facing in the marketplace? Because remember, customers don't make decisions in a vacuum. It's not your product versus not having a product. This is your product versus all the other products in the competition. So we're going to have to be looking at this. What else? Collaborators, right? These are either our suppliers, right, that are maybe enabling us to do things that other people in the industry are not able to do because we have a supply that is unique in some way, right? Maybe a material that others don't have or a know-how on how to put those materials together, right? If you look at electric cars right now, Tesla is doing a very good job among other things because it has access to batteries that others in the marketplace don't have, plus know how to manage that battery pack, right? Those thousands of cells put together. Okay. And then you have context, right? Which is basically everything else that is around the firm that is important for your marketing decisions. So this is going to be the economy, cultural changes, nature changes, right? There is a terrible storm, you know, has consequences. There is a virus that is new, might have very drastic consequences. Look what's happening, for example, to the airline industry, right? Or hotels, right? Because of this, we don't know what's going to happen. Right? Context changes, you need to change. If you don't change, you become irrelevant. Now, let's break down each of these C's a little bit more in detail. And by the way, let me start by saying that this is a list of different aspects that you should be considering. But 2 things. One is it's not an exhaustive list, so there could be other aspects within customers that are important that I have not discussed. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't look into them. Okay, if you know that they are important in your industry. And number 2, some of these aspects may be very important in one industry, but not very important in another, right? So this is kind of like a checklist, things that you should be thinking about for sure. But it doesn't mean that there are not other things that could be important. And also it doesn't mean that some of these aspects might not actually be sort of not very important in your industry. That is very possible, right? So this is kind of like a big list of things that you should be looking for, okay? First, within customers, one of the things that you should be thinking about is how your customer behaving, right? What kind of actions and behaviors are they undertaking? And most importantly, why? Why are they doing this, right? So what we're going to try to do is we're going to try to understand the patterns of behavior. What it is that people are doing in a particular product category or industry, right? And so by this, one of the aspects that we should be considering in terms of patterns behavior is who is making the decision, right? And this might seem trivial, right? If you're selling gum, right? And most of the time, people make a purchase about gum, and it's one person making a quick decision on the moment, and there is not a lot of influences into that other than maybe what they like and don't like, and what they can actually see if they're walking by the register, for example, and at a store, right? You have a bunch of shelves in front of you that have gum and other knickknacks, and you just grab the gum because it's actually right there, right? But in other purchases, there might be multiple agents involved, right? And if you have kids, you know exactly what I'm talking about, right? So when I go with my kids to the store, which happens fairly frequently, I am the one that buys all the groceries. Although nowadays I go to the store obviously by myself because of the whole COVID-19 issue. But if that wasn't the case, if you go back a few months, not that long ago, I would go with my kids to the store all the time, right? And now there is an interesting interplay. Even though I am the decision maker, at least in theory, right? My kids heavily influence my decision, right? Like, for example, my youngest, who's now 10, right? He will go all over the store finding things and brings them to me and tells me all the reasons why we should buy whatever product he has actually found that he thinks is interesting, right? So, you're going to have multiple decision makers, right? And not only decision makers, but also influencers, right? So in my household, and even though I go to the store and my wife will give me a list of things that we need to buy, right? So when it comes down to a lot of things, she is actually the one making the decision. I'm just making the purchase. So there is a distinction between the decision maker and the one that actually makes the purchase. And then there are influencers into it. So the actual decision making unit, it's actually a complex convolution of different people. In my household, we are 5 people that are making the decisions, right? So, some people have more of a weight than others, and some people play different roles. So you really need to understand that, right? Who's making the decisions in your product category, right? Oftentimes it's hidden in the background. The person making the purchase is not the same as the one making the decision. You really need to understand this, right? And I think I've already talked about most of these roles, right, that you can play. Initiator is who notices that the need is there, right? So in the case of my household, because my mom was not doing very well, that's the reason why we came to Richmond, right? So my in-laws live with me. So oftentimes they are the ones that say, "Hey, we don't have cereal." Why? Because nobody else eats cereal in the house except them, right? So they are the ones that initiate the the purchase, right? And the decider, well, it's usually my wife, right? Happy wife, happy life. And so if you want to keep uh, your lady happy, you better listen to what she has to say as much as you can, right? So the decider, influencers, my kids are heavy influencers when it comes down to a lot of the purchases, right? Because they have strong ideas about what we should and shouldn't buy. Purchaser is usually me in my case, right? When I'm buying groceries. And users is all the above when it comes down to some products, maybe only some of us when it comes down to others, right? But I want you guys to understand that all these roles are going to be happening in many purchases. And unless you really understand all this interplay, it's going to be very hard to come up with messages that are meaningful, right? Because there is a big difference between being the initiator and being the user. And sometimes the initiator and the user are the same person. Sometimes they're totally different, right? And think about diapers, right? Uh, the mom might be the initiator, but who is the user is the baby, right? So you really need to understand complex decision making and who plays what role. This is really essential to really understand the problem so that you can create the product and also all the messaging associated with it. Right? Who are you going to be talking to? What emphasis you need to put on? What benefits, etc., etc. Because they all care about different things. What else? And then what is the process other than decision making unit? What kind of process are you following? And it's going to depend on the product category, right? So first, you're gonna start looking for information. Right? And that information search might be very trivial if it's about a product like I was talking about before, like gum, right? Maybe just scan the store, right where you are, and then see the product, and boom, that's all the information search you're doing, right? Or if you're somebody who buys all sort of gum, right? Maybe you just look for new flavors, so you spend quite a bit of time. You go to the aisle at the store where all the gum and candy is instead of just finding it by the register, right? So the level of information search will vary within even a product category depending a lot on the particular consumer. You might have consumer that is a very uh, interested party that really buys a lot from the product category, that knows all about all the different flavors and options and prices and formats and categories, right? Whereas there might be other buyers that are like buyers that barely buy anything, right? And they do have very little information search in that aspect. They just grab whatever they see, right? What kind of criteria do you use for evaluation? Again, it's could vary dramatically, even within the same product category, right? Some people are going to just go by price. Other people are going to use brands really heavily because they have an adverse reaction. And here is what it's interesting. This could change for the same person. So you could have two instances where the same person uses very different criteria, right? Think about yourself and how you choose where you eat a meal, right? If it's in the middle of the week and you're kind of in a hurry, right? You might be going to the cafeteria at school, right? Or if you're kind of tired of going to the same place and eating similar foods, you might decide, hey, let's go wild and let's just, I don't know, go to McDonald's, right? Let's say that you like McDonald's. And on the other hand, same person, right? Imagine that you have a date. You met a lady, right, that you like, and you've invited her for dinner. I hope, maybe it's just right, old school, I hope you don't take her to McDonald's, right? So the same person that actually likes McDonald's for certain things because it's quick, because it's convenient, because you know the menu, and because you know you're not gonna get sick if you actually go to McDonald's, which is not true even of a fancy restaurant, right? And in that situation, because context changes, the criteria that you use for evaluation is very different, right? When it comes down to grabbing a quick meal, you care about price, you care about speed, you care about not getting sick, and you care about convenience. But when it's creating a date and an experience for somebody that you're interested in, boy, the criteria you use are totally different, right? So, right, and the importance of the attributes change dramatically. If you're eating that every day, maybe price is really important. But if you're going on a first date, now suddenly price doesn't matter nearly as much, and you're worried about other things like atmospherics and how good the food is and what your friends have told you about it, etc., etc. Right? So the criteria for evaluation also changes. Right? And what else? And all these questions that you have on the slide are actually meaningful, right? Where do you buy the product? You can see that right now, right? The same product can be purchased at a store. You can buy it online. You can buy it at a vending machine, right? I was listening to the news the other day, and I found this guy in upstate New York who has had the brilliant idea, apparently it's brilliant, I didn't know, of putting meat in a vending machine, right? And he was saying how people were just flocking to it so much that he needed to restock the machine every 3 or 4 hours, right? So he was literally cutting meat and preparing packages so that he could restock it. He didn't think it was going to be nearly as successful, right? So given the times and the context, maybe where you actually put that product is actually very meaningful, right? And how is the product used, right? I've already given you the example of the restaurant, right? A restaurant is not a restaurant. It's a restaurant. It really depends on the usage occasion, right? And you can see the same thing when it comes into other services like a dry cleaner, right? I mean, I'll be very frank and honest with you guys. I don't use dry cleaners much, right? Why? Because I do a lot of this stuff at home myself because I'm trying to save some money. However, if I have a job interview, right, I want to make sure that, within what's possible for me, I want to look the best I can. So I'm going to take my suit to the dry cleaner, which is something that I wouldn't do on a regular basis, right? And so it really depends on many aspects, right? And you need to understand this. How frequently are you buying the product, right? If you're buying it a lot, maybe you're looking at some variables. If you're buying it very little, it's just to try it, not a big deal, right? And etc. Other things that you should consider. What benefits are people looking for? Okay, and this is something that you can see in many product categories where if you think about it shallowly, you might not realize what's going on. I'll give you an example of something that surprises me, which is expensive watches, right? I think I mentioned this. I do like watches, right? I have a very small, inexpensive collection of watches because I don't have the money to invest heavily in this hobby. Right? But one thing that fascinates me is people that spend thousands and thousands of dollars on watches. Right? Especially if you know anything about, and by the way, they are not called watches when you spend thousands of dollars. They are called timepieces, right? Because if you say a watch, it sounds like something that you can buy for $20 at Walmart, and that's not what they are talking about, right? So when you are thinking about buying a Rolex, for example, and let's say an entry-level Rolex, I think goes for about $5,000, right? 5K, right? You can buy a lot of watches at Walmart for $5,000. So it's a very different animal, right? So what are people looking for? And when you think about a watch, right, you might think, well, what is the watch for? Is to tell the time, right? So what will be useful then? Well, it will be useful to be able to see the time appropriately, right? It should be easy to read, right? Good. What else? Maybe accuracy matters, right? But it's interesting because when it comes down to accuracy, you can go to Walmart right now and buy a Casio watch for $10, $15, $20. I don't know exactly. It depends on the model, right? And that Casio watch is going to be more accurate than any Rolex watch that you can buy. Right? A Rolex watch will be chronometer certified, which means that it's accurate within 2 seconds a day. Right? So it's going to, on average, lose less than 2 seconds a day. But a quartz watch like a Casio, it's going to be accurate up to less than a second a day. Right? So accuracy is not what it is. Right? So why are people buying a Rolex? Right? It's not about the watch, right? It's other benefits that surround the brand that is selling the watch, right? Because what this person is looking for recognition, brand recognition, and status within society, right? They are not looking for accuracy or other aspects of the watch. The actual performance of the watch is totally secondary to other benefits that you are not thinking about. So improving the accuracy of the watch is not going to get you more sales. So if you are thinking about benefits that are really not meaningful for the customer, you're going to miss the boat, right? Other aspects, price sensitivity, right? Not everybody's the same when it comes down to that. You can see that with the watches, but you can see this with everything, right? Price sensitivity is how much people react to a change in price, right? And this is going to vary dramatically depending on the actual customer and depending on the industry, right? There are some products that when they change in price, it's very hard for us to substitute and change, right? So when gas prices, now they are very low, right? They are on average about 160, 170 around the Richmond area. If the price goes to $3, in 6 months, and a lot of people cannot change their behaviors because they already live where they live, so their commute is set. They work where they work, so their commute is set. And they have a car that they have. So again, even if the price is changing, there is not a lot I can do. Maybe I will drive less on the weekend, but it's hard to change your commute, right? And it's hard to change your car. It's expensive. I mean, you can do it. You can buy an electric vehicle, then your gas consumption will go down dramatically, right? Maybe to zero in that case, if that's the only car you have in the household. But you need to realize that people cannot change dramatically because of that. They might be less price sensitive, right? And this is a variable that you really need to understand. Okay, we'll talk more about this when we talk about price. So we've talked quite a bit about customers, and I will argue, like I think I said already, that it's the most important. What else should you gather information about to make better marketing decisions? your company, right? And this might be a surprise to some of you. It's like, well, we are in the company, so why should we gather information? Because especially in a large organization, you might not know what other departments are doing, right? So you might not be aware of all the capabilities that you actually have built within the firm. And you need to know those very well, right? So if you are thinking about launching a new product, what your R&D department is doing actually is very important, right? What kind of capabilities do you have? What kind of access you have to capital if you need to invest heavily, right? And that might be something that you as a marketing guy might not know. You might have to talk to finance. So you really need to understand what's happening within the firm. Now, if you take a marketing approach to this, remember how we talk about the marketing concept, and the way your company is going to be defined and run, it's going to be with the customer in mind. Okay? And one thing that you really need to understand in this problem of marketing myopia that we alluded to in chapter one. So you need to define your company not in terms of your product or service, but in terms of the benefit that the customer is gaining from it. And the reason why you should do this is because if context changes, and we're going to talk about context in a few slides, and your product might actually disappear and become obsolete. Look at what happens with cars and horses, right? If you go back to the end of the 19th century, that's when cars started appearing, and they were a luxury item, and very few people could uh, afford one. And you know, most people will use a horse or a carriage with a horse, right? That was the means of transportation at the time. Now, in that situation, a technology changes, and because of that, suddenly now all these horses become obsolete, right? And the same thing could happen to cars. You know, what if there is a new technology that enables you to fly through the air? Right? Which we are not there at this point, right? But what if it were to happen, right? Now suddenly all car companies will become obsolete, right? If you want to take the car business, look at what's happening with EVs, right? Electric vehicles. And by the way, electric vehicles are not new by any means. If you look at the history of cars, late 19th century, there were electric vehicles. Okay? The only reason why electric vehicles died down over time is because the battery technology was not there. It was not sufficient to really make them competitive against uh, internal combustion engines, right? Mostly gasoline and diesel. Right? So if you define your car as, sorry, your company in terms of the product, right, you're doomed to fail. So you need to define your company in terms of benefits that the customer is looking for. Because remember, those benefits are going to be a function of the needs of the customer, and those needs haven't changed in thousands of years. Now, the way we achieve a benefit that is going to satisfy our need, it's going to change with technology. But if we are in the transportation business, transportation has been around for thousands and thousands of years. You want to get from point A to point B. How you achieve that, it's irrelevant. It's just a function of technology and what's culturally acceptable. Right? So if you take this perspective in terms of benefits and what the customer is trying to get, what are the needs, instead of what the product that you're using to satisfy your needs, you are a lot more likely to succeed, and you're a lot less likely to be run over by a new technology running company, like historically has happened with almost all large firms. So this is saying the same thing that I just said, right? It's about the need, right? And if you define yourself as a company in terms of the needs, you're a lot more likely to come up with a product or a service that is going to satisfy those needs. And because of that, be exciting for the customer. And B, you're a lot more resilient, right? It's a lot harder to get rid of you, even if technology changes, even if there is a new context, you're going to be focusing on the need. And because of that, you're going to be able to survive, even when the context is not favorable to you. Here you have an example of this, right? Nike. Nike is a fantastic company in many ways, right? And from a marketing perspective, they've done a fantastic job. Notice that in most of their advertising, it's not about the product at all, right? One of the most famous campaigns for them is "Just Do It," right? "Just Do It" doesn't say anything about the shoes. It doesn't say anything about any athletic wear, right? It's just do it. Just do what, right? And Nike is trying to help athletes. Right? In fact, if you look at their website, one thing that you will see is that the company mission is to help athletes achieve their goals or be the best they can be or something like that. And what is fascinating to me, this is the brilliance of the company and how they are really thinking about the marketing aspect of things. And what they do is they say, is to help athletes be their best. And the athlete's word has an asterisk on top. And if you go to the bottom of the page, in that asterisk, the company says, if you have a body, you are an athlete, right? Which I think is absolutely brilliant, right? Because it just brings up, all your customers, right? You are an athlete, at least potentially, right? The only reason why you're not actually an athlete today is because of all the choices you've made, right? So you've chosen not to get up early in the morning, go and run or whatever it is for your athletic endeavors that you can actually be pursuing, right? So what they're trying to do is they're trying to become better yourself, and they're going to do that using technology and the products that they actually put together, right? So it's just brilliant, 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 brilliant. Define yourself in terms of benefits, what the customer is trying to achieve, right? And then all these products fit into place. By the way, Nike started as a company by reselling, they didn't even make shoes, reselling running track shoes that they were buying from South Korea. Okay? So this is an old story, right? But it all started by somebody that saw these cool shoes and decided, hey, here in the US, because he was running track, he knew that they didn't have the shoes and decided to start importing them slowly, and boom, the rest is history. But it started all with a track shoe. Now, that's not even remotely their biggest product category right now. The reason why is because they don't define themselves as selling sports shoes or even selling track shoes, which would be more narrowly defined. They define themselves as helping athletes become their best, right? And that means almost anything. And look at some of the new products are not even built around uh, sports equipment. It's built around apps and computers that help you become a better athlete, right? And the partnership with Apple. And good. And here I have a couple other things about this. In terms of defining your business, if you are Nike, right? What then you're going to do is you're gonna just look at sports in general and see how you can take a piece of the action, right? You really don't care when it comes down to shoes or in what kind of sport. They are all good because they are all athletes, right? And the goals that you're gonna set then are going to be a lot broader, right? They're gonna be things like, I'm gonna be looking at growth in sales. I don't care about whether it's coming from shoes or if it's coming from selling uh, golf clubs, right? It's really irrelevant. And now, what kind of concrete information should you be looking at from your competitors, right? So we talked about the firm, right? We've talked about how you need to understand your capabilities. You also need to define your firm in a way that uh, it's customer driven, right? And because of that, it's much more likely to succeed and be resilient to changes around you. Number two, now you need to look at competitors, right? So what are other competitors doing? You're going to have to gather information about their capabilities, right? How they are coming up with new products, for example, right? What kind of brands do they have access to? And those are capabilities. What is their cost structure, right? Do they have a plant that enables them to produce their product at a cheaper price than you can? Okay? That would be an important thing to know, especially when it comes down to pricing, right? What kind of strategies are they using? For example, if I cut my price, are they likely to quickly cut the price and respond to my price cut, or are they slow to do so? Right? Do they think twice before they cut their prices because whatever, right? Because they are more cautious. Right? You need to understand how your competitor is right now and likely to react in the future. Right? And how can you gather this information? Well, if it's a public company that you're talking about, public companies by law, they are going to disclose a lot of this information to their shareholders, right? So if you go through their annual reports, You're going to be able to see what they are working on. They're going to talk about, in the future, these are areas that we are thinking about entering. And so if you want to know what kind of moves you should expect in the next year from that firm, that's going to give you hints, right? And you're also going to have PR, public relations articles that are going to be published about firms. You should actually look at those, right? So oftentimes firms will put together news pieces for news agencies talking about how great of a job they're doing with something. And oftentimes they disclose a lot of information, and that could actually be important for us to know, right? You could also gather information by being a mystery shopper, right? Buying some of the products, and that's not even a mystery shopper, right? And this is done constantly, right? So, for example, if I'm BMW and I know that Tesla is now a leader in electric vehicles, what am I going to do? I'm going to buy a few Teslas, right? And I'm going to help my engineers go through the whole product and reverse engineer their product, right? So that I can see what kind of capabilities do I need to build if, like BMW is doing, if I'm saying that I'm going to electrify all my fleet of vehicles, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at the best competitors I have, see what they are doing. Oftentimes that involves reverse engineering things. By the way, there are firms that do this for you. You don't even need to buy the products. You can just commission a study, and there are companies that specialize on reverse engineering. Okay? And they will actually tell you exactly what components are in things and how you should build some of the stack yourself so that you have the capabilities that you need. Okay, etc., etc. You get inventive. You know who your competitors are, and what you need to do is you need to make sure you keep an eye on to see what they are up to. What else should we be looking at? What are they trying to achieve in the future? Right? What kind of assumptions are they making about the marketplace? For example, right now in the car business, there are multiple companies such as Volkswagen, and I was talking about BMW before, that have already declared that in the next 3 years or 5 years, they are going to be heavily investing in electric vehicles, where other companies like Honda and Toyota are taking a back seat when it comes down to this, right? So there are different assumptions being made by these competitors about what's going to happen in the marketplace, right? What is going to be the technology landscape looking like? And you need to understand this so that you can know what they are going to be investing in and what kind of capabilities that they're going to be building. Okay. And what else? Also, what is their mindset, right? Which of your competitors are more aggressive? Which ones are they going to chase you? Which ones are they going to engage in price and competition with you more heavily, right? And you really need to understand who are the ones that are going to cause trouble within the industry, and which ones are the ones that are more steady, and because of that, they might actually undertake less aggressive action against you if you decide to do anything in the marketplace. And again, not only your competitors, but you don't do this alone, right? What are your collaborators? Collaborators are firms that are actually going to help you get to market, right? And we're going to make a distinction between upstream channels and downstream channels. So what is upstream channels? Upstream channels are your suppliers, right? We're talking about the firm, and anything that is further up the chain, right? And it's going to be a supplier, right? We're going to call those upstream partners. So if I am making, I don't know, what could be making? If I'm making cell phones, right? Who are going to be my upstream partners? They are going to be, for example, companies that supply my chipsets for the smartphones, right? So there are going to be maybe companies like Qualcomm that make most of the chips in today's cell phones, right? So I'm going to go to them for expertise and product when it comes down to the operating processor within the smartphone. Right? Those are going to be my upstream suppliers. And they are going to provide a lot of technology know-how for me in that particular aspect. Right? So they are going to enable me to come up with a product that otherwise I probably couldn't. If I have to do in-house all these components, and most of the products will just not happen. So your upstream partners play a key role in what kind of capabilities do you actually have in the marketplace. Right? And then you have also downstream channels, which are also important, or downstream collaborators. Right? So that will be mostly your channel members. So if you are, for example, Procter & Gamble, right, and you make Tide, right, laundry detergent, the most popular laundry detergent in the US. In that situation, what do? Getting your product to market, it's difficult. Why? Because your uh, customer base is very diluted, right? There are people that use type all over the place. So how are you going to get to them the product that is pretty heavy, right? And that costs, let's say, five to, depending on the package size, $5 to $20, right? So it's a small amount of money relative to uh, the cost that it takes to ship that product. So what are you going to do? You're going to use collaborators like Target, right? And that are going to enable you to get that product to the customer in a way that is cost efficient. Right? And they're going to provide other things like, nice ambience, right? Maybe convenience. Maybe they will even provide other services like financing. Right? If you go to Best Buy and you're trying to buy electronics, one of the things that they're going to give you is financing to purchase that electronics product. Right? What else? We have other types of collaborators like technology alliances, right? That's when you actually get together with somebody, maybe because you need access to a technology that otherwise you don't have, right? I think I already mentioned Tesla and Panasonic, right? Getting together, and over 10 years, Panasonic providing the technology in batteries so they Tesla can create the product. Now, Tesla has learned sufficiently from their partner that they are building their own batteries, but that was not possible for them to do 10 years ago, right? So technology alliances play an absolutely key role oftentimes, right? And you could also have market alliances, right? Where you actually, instead of necessarily uh, trading technology or using somebody else's technology, where you just get market access. What do I mean by market access? For example, if you're trying to enter a new country, as a market space, right? So let's say that you want to go to China right now and you want to sell some product there. And you actually need a local market firm that is going to enable you to actually distribute your product, right? Among other things, because in China there is legislation that you cannot just go alone. You need a local partner, but that's just incidental. Oftentimes, it's not because it's legally necessary; it's because it is actually they have know-how that you don't have. They have connections that you cannot have access to, and because of that, it's absolutely essential, right? It could be about finance, right? It could be about getting capital. Sometimes getting capital is not easy. Look how companies now are really struggling because of context, and they're having to either file for bankruptcy or get financing, and maybe asking the government right now for some of this financing. Look at huge companies like Boeing, right, who are really struggling right now because the market conditions have changed. Plus, in the case of Boeing, they really have screwed up in the last couple of years on how they've managed their 737 MAX and problems. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you can Google it. And it's not critical here, but it's kind of interesting. And what else matters? I think this is the big broad category, which is context, right? Context, if you remember, it's everything else that matters that is outside the firm and really outside the industry itself, right? So you're going to have the economy overall, right? What happens when the economy contracts severely? Maybe when you have more than a recession and depression, right? Hopefully we don't get here, but there is a chance that that's going to happen because of the whole coronavirus thing, right? So that's going to have a huge impact in pretty much every industry. But there are going to be some industries that are going to be a lot more heavily impacted than others, right? So, for example, if you're a luxury uh, brand, like for example, an upscale restaurant, you're going to get hit a lot harder than if you're McDonald's, right? And so you really need to understand what impact the economy is going to have in your industry and particularly in your product sales, right? And how you're going to overcome it. Maybe you just need to launch a new product category or a new product, or you need to refocus the brand. It depends on how drastic these changes are. You might actually be forced to do that. Political changes could also have a big impact, right? If there is new legislation passed that, I don't know, for example, makes car emissions more stringent, right? Then suddenly Tesla will be sitting pretty, right? And on the other hand, if some of that legislation is maybe relaxed, like it has happened in the last 3 years, then maybe suddenly what was looking very good for cars that were heavily invested in electric vehicles may actually become less relevant, especially now that gas prices are low. Again, another contextual variable that you usually have no control over, the gas prices that have changed because of geopolitical demand. It's a lot weaker, right? Now that every country is looking at least a recession, maybe even depression, suddenly the demand for gasoline is not there. And if you add to that some other political changes that have happened between OPEC and Russia, which obviously you have no control over, now suddenly gas prices plummet, right? What is the impact of that for your industry? Maybe huge, maybe nothing. It really depends, right? And social changes, right? And social distancing. What are the implications for your firm? You know, we are at a university where right now I'm delivering the lecture to you online because of some contextual change that the university has absolutely no control over, right? And it has consequences, right? It's harder to do that. It's harder to understand what's going on. It's a lot easier if you have contact with people. You can work together in the classroom. Now we can't do that, right? And technology improvements, Zoom, right? Look at Zoom, by the way. Right, I think I read yesterday or the day before that Zoom is a company that for the last few years have basically padded along. Not a big deal. Not a lot of companies have bought into this whole remote meeting thing until suddenly, forced by context, now they have over 300 million uh, users. Actually, not users, 300 million uh, meetings a day, right? I mean, in fact, they have had to revamp their whole server infrastructure because they just don't have the capacity for what has happened for them. Their growth is just through the absolute roof, right? So technology environment changes. In this case, more than the technology getting better is because some of the social and economic aspects are changing, right? But technology changes could actually drive this and have a huge impact as well. Right now, we're looking at solid state batteries and what the impact is going to be if they come to market. They are not in the market. I think Samsung might actually launch a cell phone with solid state battery. And if they do that, it's going to be interesting, right? It's going to enable you to use the cell phone for a lot longer and to charge it in 10, 15 minutes, right? And so technology environment can have a huge impact on what we do, right? And so what's happening worldwide? First, demographic trends, right? So we have an aging population, right? The pyramid of demographics has inverted. It has gone from a lot of young people to a lot more older people. And this is because of many things, right? Food is plentiful, this in developed countries, and it's inexpensive, right? And also we have access to healthcare that has given us things like vaccines and antibiotics and also the procedures that enable us to live longer, right? Like my mom is a good example of this. When she was 60, they thought she was gonna only be around for a few more months. And guess what? She's 84 and she's still around. She has had 5 heart surgeries, 5. One of them in Spain when she was visiting us, right? And to be honest with you, when the doctors in Spain looked at her uh, medical records, they were shocked about the number of procedures that they have actually been performed on her. And yeah, so we are in a situation where people are living longer. And this is going to have huge implications when it comes down to services that are needed, when it comes down to design of products, right? Like smartphones right now, right? Smartphones typically now they have just a big touch screen. And this is not a very good product when it comes down to somebody who's 84, right? And so you're going to see, I suspect, I think there is a latent need there. You're going to see products reimagined for people that have a challenge when it comes down to their motor skills, like older people have, their vision, right? So you're going to have to reinvent some of these products that now we take for granted because you're young and you can do it. As you get older, like me, for example, now I'm starting to have a hard time seeing some of these things, right? You also have an increase in population diversity. You can see a lot more movement. Minorities are getting bigger, so they are less of a minority. So if you look at Latinos, for example, in this country, there's been quite a bit of an expansion in the numbers. And so that's also going to have an impact in the way you communicate, what kind of actors you use for your advertising, so that you can really connect with this diverse population, right? And what else? Lifestyle changes, right? I mean, think about the traditional family, right? Where uh, one of the parents is the breadwinner, right? And traditionally the male. Don't get upset. I'm talking about facts. If you don't like it, you can always change it, and it has changed in the last 30 years. So don't think that I'm saying anything's good. It's just telling you what it was, right? And that has dramatically changed. And now you have a lot of families where both parents work, right? And that has a huge implication for things like kids, right? Now suddenly you need babysitters and you need access uh, to childcare, right? Because you're too busy, you're working, you have a career, right? And what else? Businesses are becoming more and more casual, right? So right now, unless you work in certain industries, like if you go to banking or law firms, you will see a lot of people that are dressed in very traditional outfit, like suits, etc. But if you're in a tech company, flip-flops, shorts, and a t-shirt, it's just pretty common, right? So those are maybe the extremes, but most firms are now fairly business casual, right? So it's very typical that you just wear some slacks and a polo shirt, and everybody will be okay with that, which 30 years back, that would have been almost heresy, right? And also, more and more emphasis on health and nutrition, right? And you can see this in a lot of products that are now trying to emphasize the benefits uh, of the product. So you talk about things like nutraceuticals, which are products that have health benefits beyond just the nutrition itself, right? That are gonna, help you get better or improve in some way. One of my favorites, time spent watching television has dramatically declined. However, we've substituted the TV with this, right? The actual time we spend in front of devices, I would argue, has increased actually. And people spend hours and hours in front of their TV, sorry, their smartphone, and doing their social media and texting, right? So, you need to reflect those changes in things like the way you communicate with your customers. And yeah, and also one thing that is actually positive, I think, people becoming more altruistic, right? Everybody's talking about how millennials are not interested in possessions as much, right? And it's not just about me, it's about improving society. I think those are fantastic changes. You need to cater to those, though, if you're a marketer, right? You need to really understand your customers and how culture has changed. Now, linking with the demographic environment, the book goes into a lot of detail about the different generations. So here you have them, baby boomers, 46 to 64, right? This will be probably your grandparents, right? Generation X, that's me, full disclosure, right? And millennials, right? Maybe some of you, maybe, right? And then Generation Z, which is most of you. So just read through the book carefully, and they'll tell you a few stories about them. And this whole generational changes are interesting, right? They do have some story behind it. But I want you to realize one thing when we talk about segmentation, even though everybody will allude to these generational differences, we're going to go more into detail and we're going to break down each of the generations into more actionable segments. So read this carefully in the book so that you have at least a story, so that you know that, like I said before, maybe millennials don't care as much about things as maybe baby boomers or Generation Xers, which is good to know, right? But also realize that there is wide variance within each of these generations. So what we're gonna do in the future is instead of only looking at demographics, we're going to try to look at preferences, which I think is a much more actionable segmentation scheme. But you should know